Welcome to day 7 of our challenge. And here's our first tactical exercise, calculation thinking method. And in this position, it's black's turn to move. Now, I just want to give you a hint here. The solution to this puzzle is maybe slightly deeper than some of the other tactics I've shown you before. So you'll have to think a little bit deeper than you've thought before. Alright, so you can pause the video here and see if you can find a tactic for black. Okay, so finding the threats. First of all, white doesn't have any serious threats against us. This queen move is covered by the bishop, so it's not a problem. So we can move on to the next step, and that is to find possible targets. Okay, so this pawn is a target. Although we can't capture it right away, also this pawn won't be protected anymore, and white is going to play queen takes f6 check, so we have to keep that in mind. The bishop is a target. Remember, I say an undefended piece is always a target, and therefore the queen should always also be a target. And the white king being exposed is also a very definite target. Okay, so now we start calculating all the checks. And probably the first check that you should calculate here is the move queen to d1 check. Queen to d1 check, because it forces the king to f2. And now we can have a look at this nice move that captures a pawn and checks white at the same time. And on top of that, the white king is forced to move to g3, which reveals a motive. The king and queen on the same diagonal, and the bishop can come back to d6 and pin the queen to the king, winning material. Of course, the bishop is well protected by the queen on d1. Okay, so that was the solution to the first exercise. Let's move on to the second one. Okay, so let's do another example where you can practice your visualization skills at the same time. In this position, white played the move king to g2 and black advanced the pawn to b3. Okay, so visualize those moves in your mind. King to g3 and pawn to b3, and then use your calculation skill and see if you can find a tactic for white in that position. Okay, so let's first see the threats against us. Obviously the pawn is threatening to capture our queen, and that seems to be about the only serious threat that black has against us. Although not the only one, he's also threatening to capture our knight with the queen. Remember, the pawn moved up now, so black is threatening to capture our knight. So we have to keep those two threats in mind. Queen takes knight and pawn takes queen. Okay, then we can start to identify some targets. And the black king here is a target because we have a knight and a queen and a rook that can possibly join the attack against the king here. So the king must be a target. There aren't any other effective ways to exploit these pieces. Maybe you can say the rook on b8 is a target, but you can't really attack it because remember, black has a threat against our queen. So the only way to solve this tactic is to find something that's very forceful. Something that's even more forceful than the threat against our queen and the threat against our knight. Okay, so let's start calculating all the checks. Queen takes h7 check. It's at first glance it seems like a mistake because we're simply losing the queen after king takes queen. But we see a checkmate pattern here with the knight covering that square and that square. It's like a sideways back rank checkmate. And remember, since the white king is on g2 now, the white rook can swing around to h1 and say checkmate. If you see the solution move here, we can see it. After queen takes and king takes, rook over to h1 would be checkmate. Alright, so here's our third and last calculation training exercise for today. It's another visual-wise example, but in this case it's an example from level 2. And level 2 is quite a bit harder because you have to visualize 4 moves. So when I click the start button, there's going to be 4 arrows that you have to track. So if you're ready, queen went here. Okay, so if you want to see that again, I'll click it once more. The queen went here. then black pushed up the pawn, then white captured the knight, and the bishop captured the bishop. If you want to see the moves again, you can just rewind the video. Else you can try to visualize that position in your mind and then see if you can find a tactic for white in that position. Okay, so in this position you have to visualize. The only threat that black really has is that he is threatening to capture our pawn on d4. So it is a threat and we have to consider it. However, it's not a dangerous threat like a checkmate threat or threatening to win a piece. So it does give us some liberty to start calculating our own tactics. So the next step is to identify some targets. Obviously, this knight must become a target now because it's not defended anymore. Remember, this bishop is now on f6. Also, the rook on a8 is a target because it's undefended, and when this pawn moved up to b6, it exposed the target, the rook on this diagonal. Another target in this position is the h7 pawn, here right by black's king, because it's under pressure from the bishop, and it's not protected by the knight anymore since the bishop captured after that exchange. Okay, so in that position, if we start calculating all the checks, we can see that if white plays bishop takes h7 check, if the king captures us, then we could play the queen to e4 check. Remember, the knight's not there anymore, we exchange it, and after black moves out of check, we can capture the rook in the corner. Or even better, if we change the move order around, we can make a threat by playing the queen to e4 straight away, threatening checkmate on this side and threatening to win the rook on that side. Obviously black will have to deal with the checkmate, and then we get the unprotected rook. So let's see the solution. Here's the full position you have to visualize. So after queen to e4, we're threatening checkmate with the support of our bishop here, and we're also threatening queen takes a8, and we win a rook in the process. If you found this tactic pretty hard, well, remember, the good news is you are training your visualization skills, and by pushing your mind in this way, your tactical calculation skills will definitely improve. I can guarantee you that. It's a good idea to push your mind a bit. Just keep on trying and just keep on doing these exercises, and I'm sure you'll be very pleased with the results you will get sooner or later. Alright, so I'll see you again in the evaluation exercises. Cheers.